All right, team, for today's brown bag, we're going to crack open a black box that sits underneath every single line of code we write. It's the memory hierarchy. Look, if we want to write truly high-performance software, we have to get this. It's absolutely fundamental. And just a quick heads up before we dive in, I did use some AI tools to help pull together and distill the core ideas here from a whole lot of material. So don't worry, this isn't just AI slop. It's curated, designed to be a super clear and concise explainer for all of us. So let's kick things off with the one question that should really keep any of us who care about performance up at night, right? We have these CPUs that are just unbelievably powerful. They can chew through billions of instructions a second. So why do they spend so much of their time doing absolutely nothing? Just waiting. Well, the answer is a problem so big and so fundamental, it actually has a name, the memory wall. It's pretty much the single biggest bottleneck in any modern computer, and getting our heads around it is the key to unlocking the kind of performance we're all trying to build. The whole issue really boils down to a story of two wildly different growth curves. For decades, CPU performance has been on this insane exponential rocket ship, Moore's Law. But at the same time, the speed of our main memory, our DRAM, has, well, it's kind of been chugging along at a snail's pace, only getting a little bit better each year. This massive, growing gap means our lightning-fast processors are constantly being starved for data. So, what did the hardware architects do about this? They couldn't just magically make gigabytes and gigabytes of memory as fast as a CPU. Instead, they came up with this really clever, tiered system, the memory hierarchy. It's not perfect, for sure, but it is a really elegant compromise that's designed specifically to try and bridge that performance gap. Probably the easiest way to think about this whole thing is with a workshop analogy. So imagine our CPU is a master craftsperson, hard at work. The registers, those are the tools literally in their hands. Access is instant. The L1 cache, that's the workbench, right there, with the most used parts just an arm's reach away. RAM, that's like the supply closet down the hall. It takes a little walk to get to. And the disk? Yeah, that's the warehouse across town. You really don't want to make that trip unless you absolutely have to. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. I mean, just look at the raw numbers here. The scale of these access times. We go from maybe one cycle for registers to a handful for L1. That's fine. But if we miss in the cache and have to go all the way out to main memory, wham! You're hit with a penalty of somewhere between 100 and 300 cycles. That's hundreds of instructions your CPU could have been executing. Instead, it's just stalled, sitting there, twiddling its thumbs. A trip to disk, that's just a whole different universe of slow. And that brings us to what is, for us, the most important point of this entire talk. This is so critical. The hardware gives us this incredibly sophisticated system, right? It gives us the potential for amazing performance. But it's our code, the way our software actually accesses memory, that decides whether we ever actually realize that potential. So you might be asking, why does this whole pyramid scheme of memory even work? Well, it all hinges on this one fundamental property of pretty much all sane software, and it's called the principle of locality. See, our programs don't just jump around memory randomly. They tend to access the same piece of data over and over, or data that's located right next to something they just used. The entire cache system is built from the ground up to take advantage of that predictable behavior. And this idea of locality really breaks down into two main flavors. First, you have temporal locality, which is the tendency to reuse the same piece of data again soon. Think about a variable in a loop counter. Then you have spatial locality. That's the tendency to use data that's physically nearby in memory. The classic example here is just iterating through an array, one element after the other. Caches are designed to exploit both of these patterns perfectly. Okay, so that model is pretty straightforward. But now we have to make it more complicated. Because let's be real, we don't live in a single core world anymore. As soon as you have multiple cores, each with its own private set of caches, you slam headfirst into a massive new challenge, the coherence problem. Here's the problem in a nutshell. What happens if Core 0 and Core 1 both have a copy of the same piece of data in their private caches, and then Core 0 decides to change its copy? Well, now Core 1's copy is stale. It's wrong. And if it tries to read that stale data, you get race conditions, you get subtle bugs, you get chaos. So cache coherence is the set of rules the hardware follows to make sure this never happens. The way the hardware usually handles this is with a coherence protocol, and a super common one is called MESI. You don't have to memorize this, but the basic idea is that every single line in every cache gets a little tag with its current state. Is it modified, exclusive, shared, or invalid?
Think of it like a little traffic cop for data, making sure everyone knows who owns what and whether it's up to date. But, and this is a big one, this protocol has a really nasty side effect that can bite you. It's called false sharing. Remember, the hardware works on entire cache lines, usually 64 bytes at a time. So imagine your thread on core 0 modifies variable A, and my thread on core 1 needs to access a totally unrelated variable B. But what if A and B happen to be neighbors living on the same 64-byte cache line? Boom! My cache line for B just got invalidated, and the whole line gets bounced back and forth between our cores, even though we weren't actually sharing any data at all. It's a huge, hidden performance killer.
So, whenever our code fails to play by the rules and use the cache effectively, we get what's called a cache miss. This is the moment it all goes wrong. It's when the CPU gets thrown into the performance penalty box, forced to just sit and wait for data from a much slower part of the system.
And we can actually diagnose these misses using a framework called the 4 Cs. A compulsory miss is kind of unavoidable. It's the very first time you ever touch a piece of data. A capacity miss means you're working set. The data you're actively using is just plain bigger than the cache. A conflict miss is a bit more subtle. It's when different pieces of data are fighting for the exact same slot in the cache. And finally, a coherence miss. That's our old friend from the multicore world, usually caused by something like false sharing.
And let's just hammer this point home one more time. What's the cost? Every single time we have a miss that has to go all the way out to main memory, we are paying a penalty, a tax, of somewhere between 100 and 300 CPU cycles. That is a staggering amount of wasted potential for a single memory access.
Okay, enough theory. Let's make this practical. How do we actually use this knowledge? Well, it all comes down to one thing: writing code that works with the hardware, not against it. We have to start treating cache friendliness as a core design principle, not an afterthought.
Here is the absolute classic textbook example of how your data layout can make or break performance. Let's say you have an array of 3D points. The normal way to do this is an array of structures. But think about it. If your loop only needs to process the x coordinates, you're still pulling the y and z coordinates into the cache, wasting precious space. But if you flip it to a structure of arrays, now all the x's are packed together neatly. When you loop over them, every single byte you load into the cache is useful. That's a perfect optimization for spatial locality. And that's just one tool in the toolbox. The key ideas are all pretty simple, really. Process your data sequentially whenever possible. For huge data sets, break the problem into smaller cache-sized chunks. That's called tiling. Align your important data structures to cache line boundaries. Add padding to avoid that nasty false sharing. And please, for the love of performance, in your hot code paths, prefer big, flat arrays over pointer-chasing nightmares like linked lists. So let's just end on this core idea. We can't just throw our hands up and blame the hardware when things are slow. Performance is a shared responsibility. The architects gave us these amazing tools. It's our job, as programmers, to write code that actually knows how to use them. So, I'll leave you with a challenge. The next time you sit down to architect a new feature, or you're trying to optimize a slow piece of code, I want you to ask a new question. Don't just think about algorithmic complexity. Ask yourself, how can I design this to be cache-aware? How can I structure my data and my loops to play nice with the memory hierarchy instead of fighting it? That's where the real performance wins are hiding. Thanks, everyone.